You know that salt shaker on your kitchen table? Well, it has a secret. Seriously, it holds this incredible story that connects Roman legions, the electricity that's literally powering your thoughts right now, and even the fall of entire empires. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, we have to start with the classic piece of trivia, the one you've probably heard a million times, that our word salary comes from Roman soldiers getting paid in actual salt. It's a fantastic story, but is it actually true?
And hey, you can see why so many of us believe it. It's been repeated over and over, even in major publications like this one. The story just makes sense, right? Salt was super valuable, so of course it was used as money. And phrases like being worth your salt seem to seal the deal.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This is where we have to separate language from historical fact. The word salary does come from the Latin salarium, and that is absolutely linked to sal, the word for salt. But that's just a linguistic clue. It's not proof. There are 0 ancient texts, not one, that say soldiers were actually paid in bags of salt. That part of the story, it's a modern invention to kind of, connect the dots.
And this number right here just blows the whole story out of the water. If you do the math, based on our Roman soldiers' pay and the price of salt back then, they would have gotten about 230 liters of salt every year. Can you just picture a soldier already weighed down with armor and weapons trying to lug around these giant sacks of salt as his paycheck? It makes absolutely no sense. It's just logistically absurd.
Now, some people will point to the Via Salaria, the famous salt road, as proof. But its purpose wasn't to deliver paychecks to the legions. It was a critical piece of infrastructure for the trade and taxation of salt. So yeah, this shows salt was a hugely valuable, state-controlled commodity, for sure, but it was managed through commerce, not used as cash for the army.
So, the bottom line is, the myth is busted. Salt was absolutely essential to the Roman world for things like preserving food. But the idea that it was a form of military pay is, well, a modern fairy tale, no matter how cool it sounds.
Okay, so this brings us to a much deeper, much more interesting question. If the myth is wrong, what's the real story? Why was salt so incredibly important? To answer that, we have to leave ancient Rome behind and travel to an even more complex place, the inside of your own body. All right, say hello to the real hero of this story, the sodium-potassium pump. This little microscopic engine, which you're seeing right here, exists in pretty much every single cell in your body. It is the fundamental reason why salt isn't just a seasoning. It's the reason you're alive. Let's take a look at how it works.
So here's the basic idea, and it's really elegant. This little pump is constantly working, pushing 3 sodium ions out of your cells while pulling 2 potassium ions in. This creates a slight electrical imbalance, a tiny charge. It basically turns every one of your cells into a microscopic battery, just sitting there, charged up and ready to go.
And what do we do with all those tiny batteries? Well, everything. This graph here shows what scientists call an action potential. That sharp spike, that's the electrical signal of a single nerve firing. Every single thought you have, every beat of your heart, every muscle you move is just your body unleashing the power stored up in these tiny cellular batteries, all thanks to sodium and potassium.
So once you really get that salt is the literal fuel for our nervous system, you start to understand its true power. See, throughout history, controlling salt was never just about economics. It was about controlling life itself.
And perhaps no one in history understood this better than Mahatma Gandhi. His whole strategy of nonviolent resistance was called satyagraha. It wasn't just a protest. It was this deep philosophical campaign of holding fast to the truth. And back in 1930, he chose a really powerful truth to focus on, the simple fact that salt is essential to life.
See, the British Empire in India had this total monopoly on making and selling salt, and they taxed it heavily. So Gandhi turned this into a brilliant act of satyagraha. He led a 24-day march to the sea, where he performed this one simple, illegal act. He made salt by boiling seawater. And that one act inspired millions of Indians to do the same, openly defying British law in this massive, coordinated act of civil disobedience.
I mean, the scale of this was just staggering. The British Empire responded by arresting an estimated 100,000 men and women all across India. But the campaign worked. It put a global spotlight on the injustice of the British monopoly, and it fatally weakened the empire's moral authority.
Think about that. By weaponizing a biological necessity, by picking a fight over a single grain that every single person needed to live, Gandhi united a nation and helped bring down one of the most powerful empires in the history of the world.
But fast forward to today, and our entire relationship with salt has been completely turned on its head. For almost all of human history, the challenge was getting enough salt. Now, our problem is the exact opposite. As you can see from this chart, the average American consumes way more sodium than the recommended daily limit, and it's created a massive public health crisis.
So what's the fix? Well, it turns out it's not just about eating less sodium. Remember that little pump in our cells? It needs potassium too. The famous DASH trial proved this perfectly. Look at these lines for blood pressure. The top one is the control group. But the bottom two lines, those represent diets rich in potassium from fruits and vegetables, and you can see a huge drop. The key is rebalancing the two.
And the results of getting this balance right can be, and I mean this literally, life-saving. In one incredible study, researchers followed two groups. The top line in this chart shows the death rate from cardiovascular events for people using regular salt. The bottom line? That's for people who simply switched to a salt that was enriched with potassium. Look at how dramatically those lines separate over time. That gap represents a 60% reduction in deaths just from fixing the balance.
So, look at where we've been. We started with a simple myth about Roman soldiers and ended up on this wild journey through biology, history, and modern medicine. We found out that the real value of salt isn't in a paycheck, it's in the tiny electrical engines that power our bodies. We saw how that biological fact can be used for political change and how understanding its importance again is key to our health today.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other simple, everyday things that we see all the time are holding on to stories this epic? What other secrets are just hiding there in plain sight, waiting for us to take a closer look?